Aloha, everybody, and welcome to Faith and Family First. I'm your host, Eva Andrade, and I'm here with my co host, Marcus Oshira. We've got actually a very exciting show today. We are going to be talking with John Stonestreet. He is the president of the Colson Center, and we're going to be talking about a brand new documentary, Truth Rising, which is an absolutely powerful Christ centered call to courage in a time when truth itself is under siege. So let's chat about that.
The questions I've spent my lifetime wrestling with have never been more urgent than right now. We're at a civilizational moment. Our foundational inspiration, our original dynamism is gone. We've lost it. Like all the other civilizations that have come and gone before us, renewal lies beyond what could ever be achieved through political action, economics, or even institutional reform alone. We, on an individual level, will all need to engage with the urgency of the moment.
That was so good. You know what I love about that clip is it just launches into what we're really going to talk about today. So I want to welcome, first of all, John Stonestreet to our show today. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So we've got a lot of listeners that may not be familiar with the Colson Center. So I thought it'd probably be helpful if you kind of just give everybody a little background of the Colson Center and who you are.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. It's an honor. Chuck Colson was one of the great evangelical leaders of the previous generation, and he started a number of organizations. One of whom, Prison Fellowship, which a lot of people are familiar with. But near the end of his life, the last 20 or so years, he really got passionate in teaching Christian worldview, helping Christians understand what it meant to hold that Christ was Lord over all of reality, and what kind of responsibility we have to live in a cultural moment as a witness to what's true and what's good. And so that led him to teach Christian worldview on a number of venues, the Breakpoint radio program, which a lot of folks are familiar with, and the Colson Fellows program, and some other ways. So we carry on that work by resourcing Christians, resourcing families, churches, and others to think like a Christian about the moment that we're in. And that really is why we jumped into this project with our friends Focus on the Family and Oz Guinness, whom everyone just heard. I think Oz is the Gandalf of our generation. He helps us understand the kind of moment we're in. And one of the things that we are deeply committed to at the Colson Center is that we are called to a particular moment. It's not an accident that we're in this time and place and not in another. So if the time and place we're in is what Oz calls a civilizational moment, in other words, an incredibly critical moment in the history of Western culture, then what does that mean for us? What's that mean in terms of Christian responsibility? And that's really what this project is about.
That's really good. So what was it that made you want to partner with Focus on the Family to make this documentary?
The friendship between Focus and the Colson Center goes back to Chuck Colson, and the president of Focus on the Family, Jim Daly, is a dear friend. I've got to, probably publicly disclose, since we've got a lawyer here present, that Jim is also my landlord, and our Colson Center offices are there in Colorado Springs. But many people remember the Truth Project, something that Focus on the Family put out years ago with Del Tackett to teach Christian worldview to churches. Chuck was a big advocate of that. And, that was really in the tradition of guys like Francis Schaeffer, who, talked about Western culture and the importance of Christian ideals of human dignity and moral absolutes to the well-being of society. Well, that was really theoretical. He was talking about new ideas that were coming in and what might happen to the Western world because of it. Del Tackett really wrestled with the implications of a Christian worldview. And, Jim and I got together and really just kind of had the same heart that a lot of those things that those guys talked about in really theoretical ways had come true. They were prophetic. And so Truth Rising really addresses this in terms of the existential crisis. I mean, listen, the last 15 years or so, 10 years has been crazy. And I don't just mean politically, but that would be enough. I mean, we're in a world where observable realities are denied. We're in a world where It's one thing to live in a moment where we all kind of agree on what progress would be, but we disagree on how to get there. It's another thing when we don't agree. We don't agree on what up and down is, right and wrong is, and that becomes a very highly unsustainable thing within a civilizational context. And that's why, by the way, as Oz is alluding to, even in that clip, uh, when we think about civilizational level things, we usually think about things that we see in museums or history books because civilizations have come and gone throughout history. Ours is no different. We're not special. If we disconnect from those ideals and those truths that animated Western culture, we will decline as well. In fact, I think it's safe to say we're in that period of decline. So, what does it mean for us to be faithful to Christ in this time, in this place?
I love that.
Yeah.
So full transparency, we love Jim Daly here. We've actually had
Who
him.
doesn't? We all do.
I know, I know. So we've had him twice when we celebrated 20 years, Hawaii Family Forum, and 25 years. He was our keynote speaker. We brought him down.
Wow.
So we just love everything about Focus on the Family. And, for those that are listening and viewing may not know, Hawaii Family Forum actually was part of that brainchild of way back when Dr. James Dobson and Focus on the Family that had this dream that there'd be these voices for Christian truth in every state. And Hawaii heard that call as men, right? I believe there are 41 other family policy councils right now. So we love everything that Focus on the Family does. We love what Colson Center does because we know that you're bringing truth to a place that is dark and it really needs it. So can you really cover that in an hour and 45-minute documentary?
Well, it's even shorter. It's an hour and 30, so it's even harder. But no, listen, Focus is a wonderful partner, and Oz is a wonderful partner. As I mentioned, I kind of consider him the Gandalf of our generation, and we needed a "you are here," right? Things have seemed so up in the air. I know a lot of us feel like to be a parent in this cultural moment, to be a citizen in this cultural moment, it's like playing whack-a-mole, where something pops up and we got to smack it on the head and we can't keep up to everything that's going on. And what we wanted to do is really put this in a context that was really understandable, understand the moment, but then also understand that a critical aspect of this moment is what Oz calls a cut flower moment for our civilization. A flower is animated by its roots and it's brought to life through those things that the roots transmit. But if it's cut off, it'll stay pretty for a while, but eventually, unless there's something else to feed it, it's going to wither and die. And that really is what we're arguing is that that's the moment for the West. But also, we're not in this moment by accident. Paul told the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers on Mars Hill, this is in Acts 17, that God determines the exact times that people live in the boundaries of their dwelling place. And this is a journey that begins with the significance and importance of truth. And it takes us all the way to the calling that all of us have, not just the Jim Dalys and the celebrities of the world, but all of us have to be truth tellers. And so we end with stories of courage. And the idea here is to call us all to be that kind of courageous truth teller. I think it was George Orwell who said, in the age of the lie, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And I think we often think about our calling as Christians. We're called to maybe a line of work or called to a ministry, called to do acts of kindness and benevolence, and all that's true. But Scripture also talks about our calling. And Oz has been talking about this for years. I learned this from Oz. And he did it in that great British accent where he talked about the importance of the hour. I can't say it like that, but the hour. But that's really what I'm trying to get at is that we are called to this time and place. And that's really why we worked with Focus. Jim shared that vision that we didn't want this just to be a film. We didn't want this just to be another curriculum. There's a lot of those. And this project is a project calling people to a movement. What if the body of Christ right now, in all these areas and in all these states and in all these angles and corners of society, we're willing to tell the truth at these critical moments? Not do it as jerks, a jerk for Jesus is still a jerk, that's not sanctified, but to do it the way that we're called to do it. And, that's what the film does, is it talks about how critical truth telling is in this moment. and tells the stories of five people who have embraced the truth and the difference that that's made. And hopefully it's an encouragement. Your life can make a difference as well.
Yeah, and what's really good is that so this documentary is not going to be shown in films. Actually, you're kind of throwing it to the grassroots. You're encouraging people to watch it, to show it in their churches, to have group sharing and group discussions. And that was the other thing. Just watching this documentary, you also have the ability, if you wanted to do a Bible study, a follow-up after. So I love that because it puts that back into the hands of the people, and that's where real change is going to happen.
Yeah, Chuck Colson really set that tone for us at the Colson Center, and we really don't believe that we're called to be super clever, commentators. Although sometimes I think our commentaries are pretty clever. But success is the fact that God has called all Christians to be engaged in the culture that they're in. It's not an accident that we're in this time and this place. And so you're right. I mean, Jim and I agree. This is a movement, and we want Christians to take seriously that their faith, their commitments that they have made to Christ are certainly personal. And that's one of the best things about the Christian worldview. It's one of the things that sets the Christian worldview apart from like Islam or other religions, that we have a God who has revealed himself personally in the Word and in Christ and to us as individuals. But that doesn't mean Christianity's private.
Mm.
And I think a lot of Christians have had a privatized view that really what Christianity is about being moral and maybe about having a good positive outlook on life, and all that's true. But if God exists, then that has implications for the world. If Jesus is the Son of God and lived and died and rose again, then these are defining truths of human history that are true for everyone. And that's the thing about truth. It's Chloe Cole says this really well in the film. It's not your truth or my truth. There's no such thing as that. Jesus is the truth. Now, what if we took that seriously? And what would that mean? And so really the documentary, which releases on September the 5th, and you're right, it's a global streaming event. Anybody can access it, and you can do it through watch parties or as individuals. But also that's followed up then. The documentary really is a call to courage. And then following that is a four-part study about kind of four ingredients of courage: hope, truth, identity, and calling. And getting our hands around the Christian ideals of hope, truth, identity, and calling will, I think, mobilize Christians into this cultural moment the way that God wants us to.
I focusing on that one unshakable truth, which is what comes from the gospel and knowledge of Jesus Christ, the unshakable truth, right? That's the thing that never changes. Because as you mentioned, in today's world, truth can be whatever somebody wants it to mean. And that could even change. So your truth today could become a totally different truth tomorrow. So there's so much confusion out there. So I love that you're focusing and bringing it back to the very crux of what we as Christians should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there's a real crisis of clarity and there's a real crisis of confidence in the church. If somebody comes up to me and, wants to fight over whether the earth is round or flat, I don't get really worked up about that. Not that that's ever happened, but I don't get real worked up about that, right? Because I have a pretty solid degree of confidence in that. But it's interesting that in light of a really hostile culture, and we've just come out of a moment, we talked to, and saw the realities of, what's been called cancel culture. We've seen people pay steep prices for living out what they believe. One of the voices of courage in the film is Jack Phillips. Not He wasn't a Christian all-star. He's no celebrity. He ran a cake shop in Denver, and and he was willing to make that hard choice. And a lot of Christians haven't been willing to make that hard choice, either with our own kids or in this moment. And what we've done is we've either gone silent or we've gone angry. And I think that betrays something about us, that we have a crisis of clarity. We don't really understand what all's going on. And we have a crisis of confidence. And, to be courageous doesn't mean we go and fight and wave our banners and show up at every protest.
Did you watch
I,
our show last week? Because we just talked about
did
that.
we talk about
Yes,
this? No, I
right?
didn't. I'm
About people
sorry.
going nuts.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, but I'm so glad you talked about it, because sometimes courage is a really little step. I mean, Oz begins the documentary by talking with some of the most incredible experts. And one of the things that's so interesting, and they're defining the civilizational moment. Some of these are believers, some of these aren't. And that's been one of the things that Jim and I both noticed, is a lot of voices, some of whom were new atheists, telling us yesterday that God is dead and religion is harmful, now saying we're cultural Christians. There's been this really interesting thing happen where people are realizing that the West cannot sustain itself. It cannot survive if it's cut off from its roots. And then the documentary takes the journey from this kind of you are here in the history of Western culture and the realities of Western culture to specifically landing the plane in. So what does that require of us? And these 5 stories of courage, one of the things I love is some of these were really small steps. Some of these are voices like Chloe Cole, for example, who believed something that wasn't true. One of the great lies of our generation. And for her, courage was being willing to change her mind, being willing to admit that she had been deceived. And now she's an incredible voice for courage. And in fact, I think we have a clip here from Chloe, don't we?
We do. Let's go ahead and play that.
You're going to have to choose basically between having a live son or a dead daughter. And it's the only choice that they give parents. They say it's transition or die. Something changed the day of surgery, and as soon as I woke up, looking down at that area of my chest, that area of my body, and what was left of my breast every single day, I began to feel like real, genuine grief and regret just flooding through like a storm. So I made the choice to detransition. I went off hormones cold turkey. I've connected with a bunch of different Christians, both individuals and groups and churches and pastors and other leaders who have not only given me a place of comfort where I know I'm loved and appreciated, but also have challenged me and have guided me to the truth. There is no my truth or your truth. I've come to the conclusion that Jesus is the truth.
Chloe is a young woman that, to me, Marcus, is absolutely, she's a hero. She has gone through so much in her young life, and yet she's a champion and willing to put herself out there. Do you know her story, Marcus?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't know her story. Well, we don't want to take a lot of time to do
Right.
that, but basically, she transitioned and is now coming back to that truth of who God made her. And she talks about that struggle and the whole journey. And just, we were just talking about the misinformation that's out there, as a young woman, just inundated with all this misinformation. And I don't know, John, do you have any more to say about that? But she's like a hero to me.
Well, I don't want to, give away the film.
Yeah.
Chloe was gracious enough to tell the whole story. And each of these stories of courage, Chloe, Seth Dillon, Jack Phillips, Ayan Hersey Ali, Katie Faust, I think they all reveal something unique about what it looks like to be a truth teller in the day and age that we are in. For Chloe, it's I think very clear, and that is that truth is not this abstract concept. We often say at the Colson Center, well, this is an old phrase: ideas have consequences. We often add bad ideas have victims. And so when we're talking about truth telling, a lot of Christians don't want that. They think it's not really faith. It's too kind of logical, or it's too reasonable, or something like that. It's too rational. Some even think it's too political. Chloe's an example that these ideas have real consequences, and lies will victimize people. And we've just gone through a whole time in history, and thankfully there's some backpedaling on this issue that's happened. And one of the reasons is because of the courage of people like Chloe, who were deceived by this and who came to understand the truth. And I think it's so fascinating in her story, her coming to grips with who she was as a woman. And it's an amazing, I don't want to give it away, it's an amazing moment where she started to doubt these lies that she had believed. And but that coming to grips with the truth about herself led her to people who believed in truth with a capital T, and that led her to the source of truth, Jesus. In other words, this isn't some kind of, disconnected philosophical journey when we talk about truth. Well, that's for the academics or the apologist, and I'm not one. I just want to love people. No, no, no. This this is real stuff. And one of the reasons that our world is now backpedaling from this incredible deception that it largely embraced. I mean, we all remember that, right?
Hmm.
3, 4, 5 years ago, it seemed like the gender ideology issue was a runaway train that we couldn't stop.
Hmm.
And now there's voices, and Chloe's one of them, and she was willing to talk about not only her deception but also her detransition, her embrace of truth, and what that means for her life, and how truth really transforms. I think it's an incredibly powerful story.
It is. And when you start digging into these things and you start looking at the stories behind them, and I have to throw Marcus out there because Marcus is a good example of this, right? 20-year plus Democratic lawmaker. And now that he's retired, one of the issues that you started digging in, right, was some of this gender identification issues that are out there. And Marcus went down, he went down the bunny hole. He went down the rabbit hole. And now it's a big issue for him. Marcus, you want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, real quickly. It's just one of my passions right now. I've discovered that this whole gender affirmation is a fraud that's being committed throughout the country. Fortunately, the president has taken the right course and issued a presidential proclamation to really pull back and re-examine this whole nature of gender affirming care or dysphoria that's important for not only all of us, but all of our communities and all our kids. So I'm glad to be involved with Eva and with you folks there on, curbing this threat to our future and our country.
But
It is a threat. There's no question, and it has been. And while some good decisions have been made, by the president and some other folks, we just saw this week in Loudoun County schools in Virginia, as if Loudoun County schools weren't in the headlines enough.
Well, yeah.
Where this issue continues to be an issue, this issue continues to penalize, school kids. I'm in Colorado. Our state's doubling down on this deception. And that's why telling the truth is going to come at a cost. It's going to come at a cost there in Hawaii as well. And so we got to be willing to do it.
Well, okay, so the documentary, as you mentioned, is going to be September 5th, right, where people can access it and they can start streaming it. But what is the hope and the dreams and the vision about this documentary? What would you like to see happen?
Well, imagine if there were a generation of Christians right now, especially at a time where it seems like there has been at least a little bit of a reckoning with what's not true, and people kind of having buyer's regret on, kind of wokeness and on the gender issues and so on. And right now that people have talked about the vibe shift, for example, that things feel a little bit different. I think they're right. But rejecting ideas that are false is not the same as accepting ideas that are true. And culture and civilization can only be renewed by attaching to what's true. Imagine if there were Christians everywhere right now, rising up, willing to tell the truth, willing to stand up for what's right, to do it in love, to do it in all the right ways, and leave the results to God. Imagine if there were Christians in politics, there were Christians in school boards, there were Christians that were moms and dads, there were Christians in community groups and volunteer associations and the police force, and there were Christians, who could discern truth in the media and everywhere, and that we then, as people are looking for truth, they're looking for answers to some of these big questions that they have. And Christians were able to point them in the right direction. I think it's a moment. We talk about the crisis of civilization that we're in, and that's true. But a crisis is an opportunity. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And we're a blind civilization right now. And Christians have the truth. This is light in the darkness. And so what we want is to see a movement of Christians who are connected and committed to be truth tellers in this time and place. And the documentary, hopefully, is a way of calling them to that life, And the study that follows it is a way of equipping them on what that would look like in the time and place where God has put them.
So as we listen to the words of Gandalf the White, not the gray, but the white, we want to make sure that we let people know how they can access this documentary. So you want to take just a quick overview on how people can watch it?
Yeah, the global streaming premiere is September the 5th. You can go to truthrising.com. Pastors can go to truthrising.com and get access to do a public event. You can also do a streaming event in your home. You can do this for small groups. And then when you go through that, you'll learn how to get the study. One of the things that really inspires me is how committed Focus on the Family has been to this project with us to make sure that it's free. There's no cost barriers whatsoever. And we want to see that be the case across the board, both for the documentary and for the study. And, listen, the study is a game plan. It starts with the idea of hope for this cultural moment. I love how Chuck Colson used to say, despair is a sin. And the truth, how to think about Christianity as if it's true, the truth about who we are, I'm made in the image of God, and then a really accessible and applicable framework for calling. Just really 4 questions that we can answer as individuals and as communities. And all that is the starting point, truthrising.com. Just go there, sign up. We'll keep you up to date on with this release. Again, September the 5th is when it'll be made available online streaming. And, we want to see millions of people go through this. We want to see Christians encouraged to do the next thing, just the next thing, nothing grandiose. That's what I love about Jack's story. He was very, all he did was make an easy decision. Seth Dillon's story's that way. Made a decision on behalf of the Babylon Bee, stuck to his guns. It looked like it was he was going to lose everything, and instead God used that decision to make an awful lot of change happen in the world. Really fascinating, and it means we can trust God with the results. And that's what this is all about.
So make sure you go to truthrising.com and you check it out. And stay tuned for more about that case with Seth Dillon, because right here in Hawaii, we've got a case. So we're going to have the aligned. I can't even talk right now. I'm so moved by this whole conversation. ADF attorney is going to be here talking about that case. So stay tuned. Like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know every time we upload a new video. And we're going to end on the last clip for the documentary. And thanks so much, John, for spending your time with us today.
Hey, thank you guys. Really a lot of fun to be on with you.
Next thing you know, Twitter sent us a notification saying that we violated their hateful conduct policy. We were locked out of our account, and we needed to delete that joke in order to restore access to our account. No, I'm not going to be strong-armed like that, and I put out a statement saying that we weren't going to delete it. This is going to cost us something personally. Somebody has to be willing to take a stand.
Thanks so much for spending time with us. We will see all of you next week. Mahalo, everybody.